We are Rogue Media Sports.
Norman, we need to pause this surgery.
What, doctor?
Because Xfinity Mobile just got even better. Now you're automatically connected to Wi-Fi speeds up to a gig while you're on the go. Plus, existing Xfinity customers can buy one unlimited line and get one free for a year.
Visit XfinityMobile.com to learn more. Offer ends 6/21. Restrictions apply. Existing Xfinity Internet service and 2 new unlimited lines required. Reduced speeds after 30 gigabytes of usage per line. Data thresholds may vary. Actual Wi-Fi speeds vary, not guaranteed.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
It is an emergency podcast. Boy, they all seem to be these days. The Doomsday podcast, of course. Ed Werder coming to us live from the Star, where the huge news went down today with Zeke Elliott signing a contract extension. And, boy, it started coming out early this morning. Ed joining us from the Star. And, Ed, you've been on TV today. You had the you had all the contract details early this morning. Everything was according to Ed Werder. I love it. I love it when that happens. And there you were.
Todd Archer got some according to love as well.
Oh, good. But, I mean, you kind of had the contract numbers, okay? Shefty was the one. He was praising you, and boy, Shefty doesn't always do that. But now walk me through the process. You're there last night till pretty late, It sounds like, and then obviously back at it this morning. And you appeared to be well fed. I mean, that was a great breakfast you had.
Well, first of all, I was out here all day yesterday for ESPN in anticipation of a possible deal getting made between the Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott to end his holdout. And we were forced to operate and conduct our live shots outdoors because the facility was closed to the media yesterday as a player's day off. And I did gripe about that a little bit, and I did try to persuade PR to allow us to use the building. Fortunately, I was unsuccessful because, as it turned out, I wound up using the lounge at the nearby Omni Hotel, so nearby our live shot location. And that allowed me a chance encounter with Rocky Arsenault, the agent who represents Ezekiel Elliott. In fact, they just flown in and they dropped Zeke off at his home. And so I got to spend a little bit of time with Rocky Arsenault, the agent who has been down in Cabo with Zeke and with Marshall Faulk and getting him ready for this. Anyway, so I know based on that there was a lot of activity on the phones with him and 2 other associates contacting their Cowboys point people, trying to get this deal done. There was a great deal of frustration for a number of hours. In fact, I thought it was interesting to hear Zeke say today that he went to bed thinking this deal was not going to get done, that he was in a bad place when he went to bed, and he was wondering whether he was not just whether he was going to join his teammates for practice today as they get ready for the Giants on Sunday, but whether it would happen Thursday or Friday, or any day between now and the day of the game. And then he said he was awoken by a 6 a.m. phone call, or a series of them. He said it took more than one to wake him up. And that he was then told the news that he had just become the richest running back in NFL history, which is a place we all know the Cowboys said they would never go on this contract. $50 million guaranteed. And my understanding of it is that the deal came together around 4 a.m. The talks resumed between the agents and Stephen and Jerry around 4 a.m. The Cowboys had actually mandated that Elliott, at least Elliott, but Elliott and his agent leave Cabo and fly to Dallas before they were going to finish this negotiation. Much to their surprise, when they arrived here, Stephen and Jerry were in New York. But eventually it all worked out. They overcame all of the obstacles, and they've resolved the deal, and Ezekiel Elliott will be on the field on Sunday against the Giants, which means maybe the New York Football Giants will not have the best running back in the game. Yeah,
it'll be quite a matchup. He is back, Ed, and his buddy Archer on the scene this morning, just representing all of us so well. Frito, if you'll please now play the music, sir. All right, and it is that emergency podcast we had planned. We wanted to do a little Giants preview. Ed, at some point, remind me, let's at least acknowledge that the Cowboys do have an opponent this weekend. Game, I can never remember a week one. We've prepared for a lot of these over the years, and we look at these teams, and oh man, this is going to be quite a matchup. Saquon Barkley, this whole thing has been overshadowed about a lot of these negotiations, but mainly the Zeke one, and things have heated up. And now finally, we're almost to week one. But before we get there, we'll do that later in the podcast. We'll mention who the Giants have. I did think it was funny, Ed, in the morning news today. Somebody, I didn't even recognize the writer, they said, okay, who will the Giants be throwing the ball to? And it just listed everybody who's kind of hurt, and they never got around to saying like who it would be. They're like, okay, Shepard won't be there, Golden Tate suspended, Ingram's a tight end, he'll be out there. They never got around to mentioning a single wide receiver. So at some point,
Bill Beckham Jr.'s in Cleveland now, so yeah.
Yes, we have to figure out who in the world Eli is going to be throwing to, but this thing gets done today. Ed, you've been on the scene. I heard Garrett was throwing out F-bombs today, asking if is this going to give the team a little juice. What was that whole scene like, Ed? After the usually we're not dying to hear from Garrett, but today it was kind of interesting because this big deal just went down.
Well, it was interesting primarily, I think, from the standpoint of what kind of shape they see him being in as he returned to the practice field. The enthusiasm that his teammates reacted with upon his return, and kind of how they're going to evaluate his readiness for the game on Sunday and what his role in that game will be, I think were the reasons that Garrett was somewhat interesting today. He did say that he thought, based on appearance, and this was before practice, that Elliott looked to be in very good, extremely good shape, and that, they would trust their eyes, and they'd get his feedback on how he's feeling, and I expect he's going to play a very significant role in the game. I mean, when he came back from Cabo in the 6-week suspension, I think he had 51 carries for over 200 yards total in the first two games back against Philadelphia and Seattle, and I think in this particular case it was interesting that Marshall Faulk was involved in helping him train. In fact, his agent, Rocky Arsenault, who I mentioned earlier, flew in a quarterback, Connor Lee, once he was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars, because they wanted to have an actual NFL quality passer in the workouts that Zeke was enduring in Cabo as he got ready to make his return to Dallas. And so Marshall Faulk told me after this deal was done that Zeke is ready for a full week one workload. And one of the things that they worked hardest on was 2-minute offense, run your route, put the ball down, hustle back, get back and lined up again, get another ball, same thing, time and time again to keep his heart rate up as well. And so I think all indications are, based on early returns, that he's in very good shape as he comes back to the Cowboys, despite missing camp.
It is Ed Werder, Matt Mosley, Doomsday podcast, coming to you live from the lavish Frito Nation Productions. Actually, Ed is off-site right now at the Star. He's right in the middle of everything today, and, of course, he was out there early this morning breaking all sorts of news. Archer was involved. Ed, have you ever you've been involved in some really interesting things. The Favre stuff was remarkable. That was sort of pre-Twitter. I don't even know if Twitter I don't know if Twitter had been invented. It may have been in its very, very early stages when all that.
I wasn't involved at that time, much to my eternal regret, because I could have a lot more followers, I think, if I had been tweeting during my tenure covering Favre and Tim Tebow. I think I could have been. I could have had hundreds of thousands of more followers.
You could have had Mosley-like followers. That's for sure. Now, Ed, was that? But have you ever seen anything like this, that it was just like, it was so-called mainstream media, radio people, it was just everybody in the world trying to have, I think people in this day and age just really want to claim, well, I said it first. And then I think 2 or 3 weeks ago it was mentioned, it's imminent. So now I guess somebody's out there probably claiming victory today. Well, we said it was imminent. Well, you said that like 2 weeks ago.
What's imminent? Define imminent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this has been a strange, and part of this is because there's just so much interest in this, but the incremental reporting, Ed, I thought you did a good job of kind of staying out of the goofiness that was going on out there, and then you just you came in throwing haymakers when you needed to, and I thought that was important from you and the ESPN team.
Well, in my experience of covering football since 1982, and the Cowboys since I first got here in this market in 1989, the Cowboys to me has always been a unique beat and a unique responsibility because it seems like there is such national interest among the media in what's going on with this team. And that's always been the case from the very early Jerry Jimmy days to what it's evolved into now. And, it used to be when you were a reporter, I didn't know what my competition knew at various points in the day. And it didn't matter what I knew as long as I knew everything there was to know that was important by the time we published a paper about 10 o'clock at night. And now it's, you can't take your eyes off your phone when you're involved as a competitor in trying to break any, substantial news on something like Ezekiel Elliott, whose, contract is being covered by so many national members of the media, plus all of the local media people and television stations, radio stations, their own websites. I mean, yeah, the competition has never been greater for every little piece of information, and all too often, I think every little piece of information is portrayed as something much more significant than it actually is.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, Ed, my only disappointment in your coverage is my gentle critique would be I really wish you had big-bodied everybody, and you're the only one pretty much of that whole crew out there at the airport that would have been a member of the Admirals Club. Now that would have been flexing right there, to just pull Zeke right into the Admirals Club, just kind of away from everybody chasing him around. I would have liked that because you're a longtime Admirals Club guy. You have a lot of miles. You've got platinum status, or maybe even what's above platinum. I think you could have. I think you could have pulled that off.
Well, yeah, I decided not to get involved in the airport scrum, however. But I did find it humorous and a little bit of a throwback to sort of, I think Channel 11 put their helicopter up to follow the van that Zeke was apparently in driving to his Plano home. And it was kind of reminiscent of, I'm not going to say the O.J. Simpson chase because it wasn't that important, but it was similar to Brad Childress picking up Brett Favre in Minnesota in a white SUV and escorting him, to the Vikings facility from the airport. It was kind of reminiscent of that. Yeah. It was our version of that.
Yeah, and it was fun. It was kind of fun to monitor all that. And this is, and boy, we even had some Twitter spats. Did you see that? Twitter beef. Some of the various members of the media going at each other. Of course, I was barely able
to restrain myself from that, quite honestly. There were a couple of different times I had a tweet all set to go, and I just decided not to hit send.
Wow.
I deleted it because I did not want to get into a public scuffle or appear to be reprimanding somebody or whatever. But believe me, they deserved it.
This is a new Ed Werder. I love this. A man who
showing
does
restraint and good judgment.
Who does it hit the send button. Wow. This turned over a new leaf. Now, Ed, as we get closer to game day, obviously the team got to practice with Zeke. He was there for Breakfast Club this morning. Apparently it's 7:30 Breakfast Club. I love it. I love the Cowboys getting together for Breakfast Club. There was a big talk about, is this a new helmet? Look at this helmet. He's got a new shield on his helmet, that kind of thing. Yeah, the new visor. What do you've obviously, Garrett thinks he looks to be in fine shape. What do you think is a reasonable expectation for him in this Giants game? I know we can't put an exact number, but what are you kind of thinking from the folks you've talked to, the Cowboys organization, for how big a load he'll be willing to carry? Because we all know how this will work. If they need him to ice the game, any sort of pitch count will get thrown out the window. But at least going into that, what do you think the plan will be?
It'll be interesting to see. I've always been one who felt like you can't give him the ball enough in both phases of the game as a runner and as a receiver. He had 77 catches last year. That was partly because of how poorly they managed the receiver position going into the year and until they acquired Amari Cooper, and partly because they didn't have a viable tight end. Now they have Jason Witten back, so there's no way Elliott's catching 77 balls ever again. But I think I would still want him to touch the ball 25 times in the game, but run and pass if at all possible, and assuming that it's a competitive game for all four quarters. I do think that they drafted Tony Pollard in the fourth round not because they anticipated Zeke holding out and wanted to be prepared to have a quality running back in the lineup for the early part of the season if he really did follow through with that. They drafted him because of what they think the two of them can be together. And so I think he's going to have a role not just in this game and not just until Elliott gets his conditioning level and is comfortable with the physical aspect of the game and being hit and so forth again. But I think he's going to play a role throughout the course of the season because I think they see him as kind of an Alvin Kamara, a James White type of player that New England has used so effectively. So I see him getting 10 or 12 touches in a game anyway, and some of that's going to come out of Zeke's allotment. But overall, I would still expect Zeke to have a very significant role in the Giants game, assuming that it's a closely contested game for four quarters.
Now, Ed, you would have loved it. During the as I was talking to you on my radio show today, the Matt Mosley Show, ESPN Central Texas, I was kind of going back to the old Galloway days. I was writing a column during breaks. And I was really hammering some quick. It was very quick, but I was hammering some stuff out to get it up there for Pressbox DFW. Now, from what I can tell, I don't know if that's ever been posted today, but that's okay. The key is
something to live for.
I sent it in. I sent it in to them, so I tried to stay on top of that.
Obligation.
I met my obligation. This is going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out. Ed, you said something interesting when you did come on my radio show earlier today, which we were very grateful for because you were right in the middle of all your stuff. The Dak thing now. Dak has an opportunity to, he hasn't really let anybody see him sweat. He hasn't seemed to complain or anything. He's just continued to lead the team, which is kind of what you'd expect Dak to do. But here we are on the eve of the season. I mean, we're not the eve, but about 4 days away from this, and he is still not under a new contract. And Zeke basically cut in line in front of Dak and Amari. He got his objective. He is now the highest paid back, not only in the league, but in league history, the way this thing has played out. How do you see this Dak thing playing out? Because it's kind of hard to imagine. It almost feels like everybody needs a breather right now. But what you said this morning hinted at, boy, if you were Dak, you would be a little bit leery to be out there in week one without that new contract.
Well, first of all, I think I should tell you that I've, subsequent to that conversation, learned that the Cowboys are continuing their efforts to sign Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper to contract extensions after they've accomplished what they did with Elliott, according to sources. And they've remained focused on Prescott and are making a late run in an effort to get this done before the season starts. I don't think anything is imminent with Amari Cooper. And relative to what you said about Elliott kind of, getting in front of Dak and Amari, whose contracts are up this year, whereas Dak had 2 years left. We talked to Prescott in the locker room, a handful of us. He didn't go on camera today. And he said he was, quote, happy as hell to have Zeke back. And I can just tell you that he appeared, very relaxed. I asked him, I said, he said he's carefully monitoring his negotiations. He knows where the numbers are at the moment. And he said that, he is willing to go into the season without a new contract and take the risk of an injury. And I asked him why he would accept that risk. And, he said, that's an interesting question. Why would I take that risk? But it's one he never really answered. But I think it's interesting that now 3 quarterbacks drafted ahead of him in 2016 have signed contract extensions this offseason. Jacoby Brissett with the Colts, Carson Wentz with the Eagles, and Jared Goff yesterday with the Rams. I think the deals signed by Wentz and Goff are very applicable and will be used by Prescott and his agent Todd France as they continue these negotiations with the Cowboys. Now, The Goff contract with the Rams would seem to me to establish a ceiling for Prescott with its reported guarantee of $110 million, even though it's probably significantly less than actual money guaranteed at signing. Because, Prescott has achieved more on the field than Wentz has, but not as much as Goff because Goff went to a Super Bowl. And so I think what Goff makes now becomes the ceiling. If the Wentz deal isn't the ceiling for Dak Prescott going forward, I certainly think the Goff deal would represent, a number that he is not going to surpass as he tries to do his deal.
Why don't more of these guys try to do what the NBA's done with those guys getting enormous contracts but doing 2-year deals? I know the teams like to spread this out, and they would rather have 5-6-year deal for obvious reasons. But from a player's agent standpoint, I think Brissett's was only a 2-year extension or something. I mean, it wasn't
right.
a long.
But he's in a unique situation, obviously, where there, he wasn't expected to be the starter. They expected Andrew Luck to be the starter, and he was supposed to be the backup. And now it's a situation where they want to be fair to him and pay him as a starting quarterback. And show faith in him in the locker room. At the same time, they don't want to overcommit themselves to him as their starting quarterback without having the ability to move on from him if 2 years from now they're dissatisfied with his performance level. So, but I think the answer to the other question, I think first of all, it's twofold, right? Football doesn't have as strong a union as the NBA does.
Yes.
This is a collision sport, and injuries of significance are something you have to financially protect yourself against. And so you want to get as much money as you can guaranteed in a system that generally doesn't provide big guaranteed money to football players. And the teams don't want to do 2-year contracts because, as we've seen with the Cowboys doing these 6 to 10-year deals, they want to be able to, spread the salary cap hit over a long period of time to diminish its effect, especially early on in a contract with a player.
Yeah,
that's why they signed Zeke Elliott, they signed DeMarcus Lawrence, they signed Jalen Smith and others to these deals, and their cap number for this season actually goes down from what it was.
Yeah, it is interesting how the cap is helped by some of this stuff, and you can backload some of these contracts. Everybody always goes crazy. 100 and what? Golf, $134 million, but of course the guaranteed is what matters. Now, the Cowboys have now, by my count, let me see if I add this up right, basically $120 million in guaranteed money between these three players in the last week or two. Does that sound right to you? 120.
And they still have their quarterback and the receiver that they gave up a first-round pick to acquire to do yet.
Yeah, and while quarterbacks, we seem to only talk now suddenly $35 million a year, $34 million a year. That's what the big deal is. But what he's trying to get, the guaranteed portion of this thing, is what did Goff get guaranteed? Okay, you got.
Well, I mean, it's been reported at 110, and Wentz's was reported at like 107.5.
Exactly.
But the real number for Wentz, the full guarantee at signing that he's going to get regardless of what happens the minute he puts down the pen, was more like $66 million. So that's the actual number. We haven't seen that number yet on Goff.
You're right. Some of that you got to stick around for long enough to pick up the money and all of that. And like for Zeke,
correct,
knowing what a running back's lifespan or career span is, after 3 years, it sounds like the Cowboys have done some things that would sort of lessen the blow on the back end if they needed to move on from him. If Pollard or somebody is ready to roll, but then he'll still be happy because he gets his $50 million guaranteed. I mean, this is the deal. Now, he wasn't going to get this much, but this is what DeMarco Murray was desperately looking for a few years ago. You would probably remember off the top of your head what Murray ended up getting from the Eagles. I mean, it was a really good number. It wasn't $50 million.
20, I thought he got like $20 million, something in the 20s.
Guaranteed, yeah. Probably similar to what maybe Le'Veon Bell ended up with. Le'Veon Bell had, $25 to $30 million guaranteed. Gurley ends up with that $45 million. And then we talked about this earlier today, Ed, Zeke just blew on by him. And the Cowboys were just determined, weren't they? We're not going to set the market for running backs. Well, they absolutely have set the market. Now, of course, they have maybe the best running back in the NFL, so part of that makes sense. But this whole thing of we're not going to set the market, well, I'm sorry. You did. They have absolutely set the market.
They set the market by a substantial margin, which is surprising given that they always claimed that, A, they weren't going to be market setters and couldn't afford to be as they managed their cap because of all the great young talent that they've drafted and accumulated, that they're going to have to make financial decisions on going forward. They want to keep as many as possible. And Jerry said after the Jalen Smith signing, we have to do as good a job as we have ever done managing the cap and making these decisions. And then for them to go out and take a contract that they claimed was an aberration at the position, Todd Gurley's with the Rams, and surpass it completely surprised me. But I think it speaks to the fact that the Cowboys are unlike most other teams in the NFL. I mean, running backs have been devalued across the NFL. That's not the case here. This team is built to win with the running back, not the quarterback. The running back success sets up the quarterback success. That's the way this team is structured. And I think the fact that they made the financial commitment that they have to Ezekiel Elliott and brought him in so he's here from week one on, really creates pressure on the one guy in the organization who didn't get a contract extension, and that's Jason Garrett.
Yeah, it does. And then how about this play caller? How about Kellen? Hey, Kellen, by the way, we're paying all these millions. We just put $50 million. We're setting the market at pretty much every position. We're probably about to give Dak about $110 million, and we need you to kind of help save this head coach, by the way. We're going to let you call the plays. I love how Jerry – have you noticed that? Like, Jerry, I noticed somebody was kind of resentful of it out there. Those of us who are a little older than Kellen, we get resentful when they're like – when Jerry says things like, well, we gave up a little bit on experience to get some of this youthful imagination. Well, I mean, there probably are people. I mean, did Norv Turner become less imaginative over the years? I mean, he's probably pretty still imaginative even now that he's in his 60s. So it's funny how we now sort of equate being 30 or 31 years old to being more imaginative.
Right. But I do think it's interesting to see what he does with the offense. I think while Scott Linehan probably got more blame than he deserved for the failure of the franchise at the end of the season, since the defense seemed as responsible, at least as the offense did, for the loss to the Rams in L.A. that ended their season. I do think it'll be interesting to see if John Kitna, with his emphasis on proper mechanics, can make Dak a more effective passer with his coaching approach, and whether Kellen Moore can use all of this talent that they've assembled in a way that's much more effective than we've seen in any time recently, knowing full well that he's a descendant of Linehan and that Jason Garrett ultimately is the head coach and in control. But remember, the most telling thing this offseason from Jerry Jones to me was when he said, basically publicly, he said to Kitna and Kellen Moore, if your ideas are not being implemented, come see me. Like, don't let the head coach prevent you from doing what it is we need to be doing with the offensive talent that they have. And I think, I was thinking this, I was sitting here in front of Dak today. Think of the team that they have now on offense versus what they went into last season with.
Yeah.
And you can understand why there's so much enthusiasm internally, and the expectations internally are so high for this football team.
I think if Dak doesn't have his new deal against the Giants, he will be checking out of most of the run plays to try to pad his stats and drive up his number. So just look for that, Ed, on Sunday afternoon.
Have we ever seen a quarterback in franchise history who's done that?
No, it's never happened.
I didn't think so.
Oh, man, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Only the Cowboys. I mean, I would say, now maybe we're biased because we're here in the middle of us, but in my mind, this story was the story of the preseason. Antonio Brown jumped up there, but the Cowboys that controlled the news cycle for much of the preseason. I would say of the 5 or 6 weeks that have, it's starting at July 25th or 26th, whenever they opened up camp, the Cowboys, and then Antonio Brown. But, I mean, those two stories have pretty much and then Andrew Luck was enormous when that happened. But, the Cowboys have controlled a lot of the news cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I tweeted this yesterday. I said, it's 48 hours before the NFL kicks off its 100th season with the two most traditional powers in all of football, the Bears and the Packers. And the Packers have Aaron Rodgers. And we're leading SportsCenter with Ezekiel Elliott, and he doesn't even have his contract yet. So that's kind of the power of the brand.
It is power of the brand, the power of the Doomsday brand. I mean, this is a big time for us, Ed. Now, I want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else you need to get off your chest, because I know you have filled up a lot of notepads. Always love it when you get your iPad out and I can kind of peek over there and see all the things you've scrawled out there. But I do want to say this: they do play the Giants. They have a game Sunday afternoon. Ed, can you name any of the starting wide receivers for the New York Giants? Go.
Sterling Shepard.
I think he's hurt. I don't think he's playing.
Well, he broke a finger, but I think he's going to play in the game.
He might play. Okay, Sterling Shepard. There you go. Good. Now they got Saquon. And everybody loaded up on him. Number 1 pick in fantasy. Ed, I had the number 4 overall pick. I went with Zeke. Are you back in that ESPN league, or did you come back too late to be in that league?
I'm not back in the league yet. No, I'm sure not.
You're on a prove-it contract.
One point I did want to make about the Giants that I think will be interesting to monitor early in the season is, this is the first time since he became the Giants' starting quarterback in 2014 that Eli Manning's likely successor is on the roster, and Daniel Jones, who they drafted 6th overall. And not coincidentally, Manning is being forced to play the final year of his contract for the first time in his entire NFL career. That's 16 seasons. And, we've all heard the Giants general manager, Dave Gettleman, say that Jones could sit out, the whole year, that they're in no rush to play him, as impressive as he was during the preseason. But this is an interesting fact that I would close at least this segment with the Giants on, and maybe it's worthy of closing the entire showdown on. But in 14 of the last 15 quarterbacks taken in the top 6 have started at least 10 games as a rookie. So that would suggest that before we get to the middle of the season, in all likelihood, Eli Manning will not be quarterbacking the New York Football Giants.
Whoa, that is something right there. That is really, Ed. That's about as interesting as anything you could bring to the table. It is a good way to end it. But Daniel Jones, is that the kid's name? 20.
Correct,
did you see his stats though? The preseason, was it like 29 for 34 or something, or 27 for 34? It was unbelievable.
29 for 34. That's 85.3%, 416 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. It's still the preseason, but it's encouraging to the Giants, I think.
All right, well, Ed, that is fascinating. I'm gonna say goodbye to you here in a minute because you have other things to get to, and then I gotta thank our sponsors. MyBookie is back, Ed, and so I'll be talking about MyBookie. Say hello before you go. Say thank you MyBookie, and say thank you to the Hodges.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hodges Capital, our good friends.
They're big time.
Our biggest financial supporters of all.
Yes.
MyBookie. I'm always glad to talk to MyBookie.
That's right. Out there in Flower Mound. I think they live right out there by you. But Ed, you've done great work. You deserve. You don't tweet about like having a drink or anything like that. I noticed some of the other reporters were like, "Oh, I was supposed to have a cigar and a drink tonight, but now I have to work." Boy, Ed, you don't tweet about things like that. You get to work, and appreciate all the fine work from you. Good stuff today. And then, Ed, let everybody know out there. I did like, by the way, when you broke some of that news earlier, and you and Archer had a bunch of news you're putting out there early this morning, after you had kind of put some of the numbers out there. 50 million guaranteed, whatever it is, 6 years, 90, 100 million, whatever it was. You threw all that out, and then about the third comment in is, hey, when's the Doomsday podcast going to come? And I like that. I like that people were ready for the Doomsday podcast. Ed, great work, and then look forward to seeing you out there for opening day. I know you'll be right in the middle of it. You'll be on the field before the game.
I will be on the field pregame, and I will be in the locker room postgame, and I'll see you in the press box in between.
There he goes, Ed Werder of ESPN and the Doomsday podcast. And there it is, folks. That is the Doomsday podcast. Always fun to be with you. And thanks again to the Hodges, Craig and Clark Hodges. Also want to say thank you to MyBookie. It is the place to bet on football every weekend. MyBookie has better bonuses and more prop bets than any other sportsbook, period. This year they're hosting the first online handicapping super contest. First place is guaranteed to win at least $100,000. It only costs $100 to enter. All you got to do is pick 5 NFL games against the spread every week to climb the leaderboard and score your share of the huge cash prize pool. That's why MyBookie is always the right play. You bet, you win, they pay. Up to $1,000 first deposit bonus. Double your first deposit. Use the promo code Doomsday. DOOMSDAY to activate the offer. Visit MyBookie online today. That's MyBookie, MyBookie. And don't forget to use the promo code Doomsday when creating your account to claim the bonus. Bet, win, get paid.
Well, the Christmas lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.